First of all, welcome to all our panelists. It's really exciting to be here. I think the Desmond Tutu Diversity Trust had hoped for a really good conversation, and I think, and it's something that we want to continue to do on an annual basis. So this is not going to be a one-off event. It's not going to just stop here. We really want to keep the conversation going. We would like to ask the panelists to please be as concise as possible so that it can be a conversation, so that all our audience can take part. So I'm going to start with Lizette because she's got her show going. So, Lizette, would you like to?
Yes, thank you, Shohreh. Shohreh, thank you. I also just want to thank Professor Danny Titus and all the colleagues of the Trust, Dr. Bum, also Dr. Son, who's been my mentor, and we've been working together for, I think, 15 years, Julian. And I think what I am today and the professional work I do today, I owe a lot to you, and thank you for that. But also the impact you had personally on my and my daughter's life, Simone, as a single mother. I also just want to acknowledge another colleague of ours, Professor Des Roberts and Umayera and Dr. Mala Singh. I think we've been walking a long road in different phases of our lives. So thank you a lot. I was put in the slot, but what I'm going to present to you is very much the work I do in the context of UNISA. And the privilege we have at UNISA is that we bring the university to the community. So we are exposed in the work that we do to be involved with students who's in civil society, who participate in their communities, who is rural and who's urban. So this is some of the things that we learned in the work we do. Our current highlighted focus, and not without the awareness, and also, like Bongani said, addressing racism as every inch of every discussion we have, because it permeates through everything. But currently, what we've seen and the work that we do, also looking at our student profile, is our focus is very much on gender. And what we realize, and I ask myself as a therapist and as a social worker, if we have such high statistics of child abuse and family violence, how come that when these children grow up, our women maintain a victim position and the men shift into being the oppressors or the rapists or the violent abusers? So that is a very, very big focus for us. And a lot of the work we do, separate work with men and women, and we realize that unless we deal with all the hurts and the points of injuries of the past, in both the males and the females, it's hard to shift. The next focus, and I'm actually when Dr. Bum said that this is an area that's been lacking in diversity in South Africa and xenophobia, is that many of the workshops that we do, and it's all over the country, and it depends on which region you work. You get students from other countries, and my brother here was speaking earlier this morning. And those participants that we work with don't only have to deal with a very, very hostile environment, which is South Africa, but they also come from very, very violent experiences themselves from the countries that they are, and poverty is a big issue. For a student to apply through NSFAS, and he's a South African, is one process. For another student who's even more poorer from another African country, is a total different process. It can take years. And there's no space that we create to share those stories, and we also focus a lot on xenophobia. The next issue that's been shifting for us in our diversity work is the language. And here we also use the mother tongue to talk about our value systems. And it's very interesting to see that when we talk, initially there's almost a shyness, which is the internalized depression, because it's not the dominant language, but really to express in mother tongue and to talk about those values that's still impacting their lives. I was doing a workshop in Cape Town recently, and there was 9 languages in the room. And it's interesting to hear the French, to hear the Swahili, to hear the Xhosa, to hear the Afrikaans, and to hear the English, and also to look at what is those common values. And I think Julian referred to that we, as people, we can connect when we talk openly and honestly about our values. And then the next level that we work on is finding our civil voice. And I think one of the speakers referred to that it's both personal, and I think Pura referred to that, the hard choice. But if you find your voice, your heart open up as well, because it goes with that. And being oppressive towards others is not finding your civil voice. So there we have an honest conversation about what is citizenship and what is the expectations. And we do that through empowerment and participation. Oh, I pressed the wrong button, sorry. Okay, I think this is the next steps, and then I will wrap up. This is also dealing with the invisible, and I think it was actually good that Prof. Aaron brought this in. And also, how do you shift from just the awareness level to really doing the work for people to improve their lives and really to have freedom to be themselves? The first thing is that we commit to the creation of a nurturing environment for ourselves, for others, and for communities. And if in a paper I delivered recently, I will talk about very specific ways in which we do this. Then continued inclusiveness through communities. We use social networks, which is effective. The students even start after some of the work, their own societies, which they then start to engage on a civil level as well. And then a continued commitment to social justice and fairness. And I think, Melissa, you said we must go a step further than that, and I agree. But through civil participation, I think this is an avenue that we can take. And then the big, I think, need, given where we're coming from, is that we will provide healing space to mourn our losses through facilitated processes, but also then to do the next steps of empowerment. And I want to end just with this comment. One of life's sharpest paradoxes is that we as people's brightest future hinges on our ability as people to pay attention to what we as people are doing right now and the choices we make today. Thank you.
I think my presentation, as you know, that the theme of this conference, how far we have come and how far do we need to go. In an African context, ngesixhosa bathi kukute emva kukute phambili. Kasi itswana ba re tsela kgopo ga ila tsenageng. What I cannot even translate this or transliterate this, but in essence it says where we've come from is far and where we are going it is still far. So you cannot even determine that journey. But again, you look at my theme, I mean, when we talk about NDP, I heard, and for me, I was looking at NDP of National Diversity Project. That's my NDP 20 years. There is another NDP 2030, National Development Plan. But I am looking at this part of the civil society as a human rights activist, defender, and what I'm saying I'm doing analysis of paralysis since 1994 towards the goal of one nation, one people, united in our diversity. And we will remember again that this motto comes from the Khoisan language. Even if one talks about unity in diversity. And I think this conference, it is timely for two reasons. It is taking place during the Heritage Month and during the month of Steve Bantu Biko. And again, it's very relevant that it takes place in the institution of higher learning, meaning dialogue, communication, research is where activation is at. And I think when you talk of diversity as a young person, one has to start as a young person first, to say when I was young, my diversity, my right to be the way I am from being born in a black township. As early as 13 years, I was very politically active. And I think that's very important at the age of 13. And I'm almost at the age of 35 now. So I've been active since at the age of 13. Even at university, I'm a product of this university, but Soweto campus. And I even studied my law degree specializing with human rights. And that's where I will come to look at this country. When you look at human rights, the Human Rights Commission was the first one of the Chapter 9 institution that was formed in 1995. You look at other institutions that I've worked with the commission with a long name. Normally we say it's the Commission for the Promotion, Protection for the Rights of Culture, Religious and Language Communities, which is very critical to this debate. Because when you talk of even diversity, we look at our languages, we look at our spirituality, we look at our culture. Our culture as young people of today, we don't greet elders anymore, we just pass them as if they are flowers. Even flowers, they do bow and they do blossom. So we need to greet elders, it's very important. When one look at our constitution, somebody said that let's look at the preamble, the preface, where it says, we, the people of South Africa, recognize the injustices of our past, honor those who suffered for justice and freedom in our land, respect those who have worked to develop our country, and believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. This is very important. And remember, there is a say that says, he who controls the past controls the future. So it's very important that if we know our diverse cultures, our diverse history, we will know where we are going. 10 days ago, our Minister of Arts and Culture was in the Parliament, Minister Paul Mashatile. He said diversity is a source of strength rather than a source of weakness, and our destiny is shared. It reminds all of us as South Africans that we are a nation's living heritage. One can say even add treasure as well, because we don't have to look at heritage only without looking at the treasure. And again, we are the melting pot. When you look around here, we are a melting pot. We are very diverse here. With our clothes, with our languages here, with our, even our appearances, the way we look just here, we are very diverse and we are a melting pot. And this continent is the same as it is, having 54 countries. I think one issue that we look in 1994, which I thought we will always forget, is the RDP. Reconstruction Development Program. But others, they say there's an RDP of the mind and of the soul. And that's where our founding president, Rawhani Mandela, spoke about the issues of involving even the young people, the civil society. I might not have touched the character of the civil society we are in now, because the character of the civil society now we are having is very different. And all of us here, we have voices. That makes us active civil society members. The civil society now, it is no longer numbers or membership or leaders. It's the voice of the masses that makes a civil society. Others will say it used to be called mass democratic movements in this country, people who fought against apartheid. And those were cultural movements, those were churches, those were musicians and artists. And you'll remember Lucky Dube spoke about different people but one nation. I will say this diversity conference should coincide with the 21st of May, which is the World Cultural Diversity Day. And that day, in terms of the United Nations, we've got a chapter that in this country is not visible, is invisible, and that is UNESCO, United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. That chapter is very important, and it is within the Ministry of Basic Education. That chapter in South Africa is the one which has to be encouraging dialogue, tolerance, and cultural diversity in South Africa since 1994, because we are one of the members of the United Nations. We are not a parallel member. We are an active member that is even that was in the Permanent Security Council. I think one issue that I didn't want to go into was to say transforming this country as a civil society. We have been talking about National Development Plan now, 2030. But I said RDP is very important for us to look at the RDP models, to look at the Chapter 9 institutions, the role of these institutions. Where I used to work at the Cultural Commission as an investigator on violations of cultural, religious, and language rights, I was privileged to work with different communities, different spiritual communities where their rights were alleged to have been violated either by the state or by other community members. And what we are doing was what we have to go back, restorative justice. How do we deal with restorative justice? Now we've got the equality courts. Most of our people, they are not aware of the role of equality courts. We rush to the high courts, constitutional court. It is expensive, tedious, and even there are rules of engagement that we need to even comply with. But if we do what one was saying, African context of diversity, I can say to you there are programs. We had Ubuntu, Moto Kabatu. African democracy was there. The issue of Khotla, Ibandla, traditional cause. Others might say to me, but Sipho, that is not relevant now. But African elders used to address conflicts under the tree, and there was consensus, and there was no victim, one can say, persecution. A victim was being brought into the community to accept his deeds, and he was brought back. Now we have more jails, and we have young people who are in those jails, but because we didn't follow restorative justice. And I think, in conclusion, I didn't dwell into NDP because we are trying to give the context of NDP the human rights value now, because we feel that NDP, it was more of an academic exercise, and there was consultation, but on the human rights aspect, we feel that there are issues that the NDP did not deal with the human rights communities. And I think finally, I will just want to say that it's very important that in building this country or this nation that we say it must be inclusive, we need to look back at the preconditions of 1994, the issues of developmental agenda, socio-economic rights, the right to shelter, the right to food, the right to jobs. Those are very important. Now we call them service delivery protests. I don't agree with that. I say those are the mandates and obligations of local government in terms of Chapter 7 of our Constitution. They fail to consult our people. They write IDP in English. People don't even understand what is IDP. They might think you are talking of Rwanda and Congo, where you say internally these people have been taken away. But it's integrated development plan. But people don't understand it because they don't consult. And budgets are rolling year after year. And I think that's where even diversity needs to start at the local government level, because that's where our councillors, our mayors are. But corruption is the order of the day. I will close by saying that Nkosi Sikelela Africa, Morena Boloka, Sechaba Sayetu, God bless Africa. I will have said in Afrikaans, but I was born in a Tswana community, Hotsin, South Africa. Thank you.
Danny, thank you very much for the invitation. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Danny, I'm still the assistant editor of City Press for 13 days. And then I start at Beeld. I want to apologize up front for not coming with a lot of resolutions, but with a lot of questions, being a journalist. I think Sipho gave us a lot of resolutions, so we can go with them. Can everybody hear me? Great. So I think there's good and bad news regarding diversity. I don't know how many of you saw City Press a week ago where we did a spread or a feature on the government's 2012 development indicators about how South Africans identify themselves, but I thought it was quite fascinating. The results were the same as what it was in 2004, that I would say only 52% of South Africans identified themselves as such. Which means 48% of people living in South Africa identified themselves as something else first. The good news was, in my view, that on people who identified themselves on basis of their ethnicity has declined from 13.6% in 2004 to 4.1% in 2012. But at the same time, we see an upsurge in these bumper stickers saying 100% Zulu, 100% Boer t-shirts, 100% Xhosa stickers on the back of cars. I've seen much more of those kind of symbols in recent times. And Justice Yvonne Mogoro, who sits on this work group for social cohesion, made an interesting comment. She said we shouldn't discourage that kind of expression, but also add, and 101% South African, after being... Was that me? I'm going to try and continue. We should also say that we are 200% South African apart, identifying with cultural groups. So this piece of research and Justice Mogoro's comments actually reminded me of a T-shirt I saw once at the Klein Karoo Kunstefees in Oudtshoorn. It was worn by a so-called colored lady, someone who looks like Danny, and on the T-shirt it said 70% Boer. And that was at the time when the 100% Boer T-shirts were quite popular, worn by right-wing youngsters. So here are some tough questions which I think we need to talk about going into 20 years of democracy. Is the Rainbow Nation dead, or is it on life support? Is this a good or a bad thing? Do we still harbor the idea of an integrated society, or are we living in peaceful diversity, each on its own? 100% Zulu, 100% Boer t-shirts and bumper stickers. What does this mean, especially when it's worn by young people? If I go outside on this UJ campus now, will I find small groups of white people sitting together, small groups of black students sitting together? And if this is the case, is this a problem? Why do we still instinctively think of race when we talk about diversity? And I think that point was harbored previously. And just to add to that, could an explanation not be that it's in the interest of the power elite to talk about equality or not to talk about equality when it comes to gender and sexual orientation? Another tough question, can government do anything to improve diversity, or should we think bottom up? That commission you referred to previously, I think we should actively lobby for a name change, because that name is just too long to remember. Why not call it the Diversity Commission? Anyway. Are we giving enough credit for parents, schools, NGOs that have succeeded in creating a more diverse society? And there I include the role of the media. I think we can do much better and much more about celebrating the successes that's been achieved in the past 20 years. Media transformation. Why do we still have mediums who report only on specific groups? Why does the Daily Sun mostly write about black victims of crime only? Why do the Afrikaans newspapers mostly write about white victims of crime? And why does a paper like The Post in Durban still exist, which only writes about the Indian community in Durban? Is this true diversity? Has civil society progressed more than the media owners and editors? Turning to politics briefly, is it in the interest of political parties to divide us? Is it in the ANC's interest to portray the DA as a white party? And is the DA holding back on embracing diversity because it is scared it may lose its white voters? And then to identify the successful bridge builders, which I really think has been music, sports and arts. Ask the hard questions. Do we still need quotas in sport? Should we still care about the race of a world-class player like Brian Abana, or has it become irrelevant? Why don't we see more collaboration in music and art? These examples happen few and far between. I think of a recent one between hip-hop Mantula and Hevels Fantasties. But those things are really few and far between. And then a question, issue that was very close to me and City Press last year was the spear. And I think we could talk about some of the lessons learned from that experience of that painting. Did it matter that Brett Murray, the artist, was white? Was it fair of the ANC to make it a race issue? And do we sometimes use race to suppress hard discussions about bad governance and corruption? Those are really just some introductory points which hopefully will leave us to resolutions. Thank you.
I've jumped into this on very, very short notice, and I feel myself like a fool who rushes in where angels fear to tread. The one wonderful thing of being here is that Adriaan has just now set me free to quote Steve Biko, to write what I like on Monday. I'll be publishing in his paper on Monday. And it's just a day before Heritage Day, and I might engage you very seriously on the heritage or the legacy, but let us leave that for now. I can only speak in terms of anecdotes and stories, and I hope that I'll be able to do what I've planned to do last night very, very quickly. The recently, or not so recently, a couple of months ago, I've decided to go for some dancing lessons at a sort of predominantly white Arthur Murray Dance School in Pretoria. Now it's a very, very interesting experience because I arrived there first of all with my gumboots on and was told, no, sir, your gumboots will not work here. Going to, and I've done that consciously, Adriaan, for my own healing. It was a self-serving thing to go to this dance school, which is predominantly white, to be trained by a young white person who is gay, to go to these socials on a Friday night and have broccoli soup, But anyhow, it's quite enjoyable. So for the sake of healing, I'm sort of celebrating diversity as a new way of being and knowing. That's the one little anecdote. Secondly, where I'm located currently, and when Julian Sons spoke about the preacher and teacher, I thought, well, that's part of my identity. That's who I am as a preacher and a teacher. Still preaching in a very small rural congregation in Mpumalanga, Middelburg, Nazareth, and teaching at UNISA now. The experiences in this congregation is quite fascinating. To be there on a Sunday is like being in a completely different world, where in the liturgical community, which is a very safe space, and this is a predominantly Afrikaans-speaking congregation, those congregants are so free in terms of hearing different languages. So the reading of the text would then happen in Afrikaans and in English and in Zulu and sometimes even in another language. So and then people would, and I would deliberately and consciously ask them whether they have picked up the equivalence between the different languages. The songs that would be sung there would be sung in different languages. The rhythm in a predominantly so-called colored, that's the intellectual nonsense of speaking about a so-called colored, predominantly Afrikaans-speaking congregation, the rhythm, the dance, the songs they taught me. Mudimo Urifil. Let me not go there. Songs in Zulu and in Sotho and all of it. It's a wonderful, liberating experience. And then, of course, the rituals, which is very, very diverse. Teaching my congregation about machidis or crossing over. I don't have time to dwell on this. I'll leave that at that for now and move on to yet another snippet, which is my experience within the so-called Religious Leaders Committee of the Tshwane Metropolitan Council, where you would have Rabbi so-and-so, you would have Imam Muhammad, you would have Pandit Singh from Laudium. It's just excellent stuff. And then the big lesson I was taught there is that we should be wary of the assumptions that we sometimes operate with, because I thought I would make a very big impression on the Imam by praising Yasser Arafat, until he told me, no, sir. You see, your Yasser Arafat is a sellout. And I thought, my goodness gracious me. So there is the issue of ideological diversity. There are all kinds of diversities that we need to engage. When Julian Son spoke in reference to the Honorable Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, I was thinking that even in that area we should allow for divergent perspectives on the role of Mandela after 1994, because millions of black people out there will tell you that reconciliation has brought us absolutely nothing. So for now, let me leave it at my little anecdote stories. I've used that as an introduction to make two, in my understanding, very important points. Or three perhaps. The one is on context and praxis. I cannot address myself to the issue of diversity without speaking contextually. I can only speak about diversity in terms of a particular praxis, be that as the simple praxis of the liturgical community, be that the simple praxis at a dancing school, be that the sort of experiences within the religious leaders committee, etc. That's the one. Then I would like to make a very brief note on epistemology, which is how we know what we know. And in terms of deconstructing Descartes almost, whose adagium was, I think, therefore I am, the anecdotes, the stories will indicate that there is a new epistemology emerging. There is a new way of knowing emerging, which simply says, I know because I experience. I know because there is a particular praxis from which I learn. I wish I had time to share with you the wonderful experiences from the time of the struggle in relation to interreligious encounter with Sheikh Kabir, giving an excellent exposition on haram in a political meeting in Atlantis, with Busak and Imam Muhammad Hassan Solomons and Farid Esak praying on the bridge there when Busak's Christian brothers have deserted him. The ones praying with him on the bridge there was Solomon's, Imam Hassan Solomon and Mulana Farid Esak. But I don't have time for, but it's a new way of knowing. So when we deal with the issue of diversity, it is of paramount importance to offset the modernist trend of formulating first, of thinking in terms of how we know what we know, as first sitting in the ivory tower to develop grand ideas, to develop white papers, green papers, superfluously, and then try to apply those to what is happening out there. I also need to say something on ontology. The few lessons that I've learned in my journey with diversity is that the diversity issue is about being more rather than having more. Which brings me to the very important issue of identity. The Stellenbosch philosopher Degenaar spoke about identifications rather than identity as a way of critically engaging the South African obsession with essentialist identities. And his understanding a single person can have numerous identifications. The notion of multiple identities or shifting identities came up here. So that for my understanding of diversity is to have many identifications in this one South Africa. And I sometimes wonder why, from the perspective of theology and from the perspective of the church, we do not tap more into the wonderful resources where, for example, the metaphor of body, which is so clear. It's one body with many different parts. The metaphor of family, the arriving at a new sort of brotherhood, a new sisterhood in this country of us. Arrive at a new, Biko spoke about black solidarity, but arriving at a new sort of human solidarity in this country. I'm very close to stopping, but I need to say something on the notion of creative tension. So the diversity should also not become a pretext for not dealing with a number of very, very crucial issues. And therefore, I would suggest that we need to keep in creative tension constantly the lowering of thresholds by venturing into new areas of meeting people, being with people, creating new spaces, safe spaces where people could be comfortable with one another, creating understanding and tolerance in the quest for greater social justice, creating a dialectical, if you like, situation between the celebration of diversity on the one hand and the battling of the holy trinity of inequality, unemployment, and poverty. It's a way of getting beyond the dichotomies. One little note on nation building. The issue of nation building is a very tricky one because most of the time it is being perceived as creating a good atmosphere amongst people, but it also deals with very intricate issues like the interdependence of South Africans, the issue of inclusiveness and interaction, the issue of values, the issue of redress has been mentioned here, the issue of non-racialism, and ultimately, my last point would be on embodiment. I think a very fine way of avoiding the application scheme of things. By that I simply mean that we're still very much into this modernist tendency of thinking that if I can write something beautiful on this paper and then apply it to whatever should happen out there, things will work out. Most of the time, they do not. So in avoiding the application scheme of things, we should, as much as possible, try to embody the diversity that we are talking about. And this is the challenge. This is the challenge. You can have diversity, like with two railway lines, who never met. So in the little lesson that I've learned in terms of the anecdotes and stories that I've shared with you, albeit very, very briefly, is that unless you try to embody these things and go beyond the mere acceptance and respect, unless we as South Africans learn to render ourselves vulnerable and search for transformation and healing, we can talk about diversity as much as we like, but it will take us absolutely nowhere. Thank you.